Welcome to the Film Illiterates podcast, your home for uninformed, unfiltered, ill-advised movie talk. I'm your host, as usual, Joe Campbell, and joining me today, also as usual, are Alex Patton.
Hello.
And Nathan Stone.
Hello, Joe Campbell. Do you want to play a game?
The only way to win the game is not to play, though, but to know. I don't want to play.
That is a valid answer, but I will override it.
So here we are again with another pick a flick. This time, Nate chose WarGames.
WarGames, yes.
The 1983 classic starring that kid who went on to be in The Producer.
I'm so glad you said that, not Ferris Bueller.
Matthew Broderick. Is it weird that watching this movie this time, I didn't think of him as Ferris Bueller? I kept on thinking of him as like, oh, he's the guy who went on to be in The Producers. I have no idea why.
Yeah, that is odd, yeah.
I mean, honestly, looking at this, it's like this was before he did Ferris Bueller, and I'm watching his performance, and I'm like, how did he get famous again? It's so weird and nerdy.
Yes, it's a very, very, very nerdy movie, but we'll get into all that. But before we start this episode, let's get into what we've been watching on our own recently. Nate, since it's your pick a flick, why don't you go first?
Alrighty. So I've had a chance to actually finally sit down and binge watch all the rest of BoJack Horseman, and let me just say, I think this is actually one of the best shows out there from beginning to end. This had the potential of going on for further seasons and, continue the story. But however, everything wraps up so perfectly in this last sixth season. There was a lot of surprises, a lot of unexpected things that happened, but everything was done very well. And I think overall the message that it's trying to say about these characters and the journeys they've been on is actually good. I think it was kind of a little rushed because I could feel some of the pacing of a lot of character decisions seemed rushed, but I could understand why, because it's like, well, we only got like 8 more episodes before we have to, say goodbye. So let's do this right. And it was good. I think my only fear was like I was afraid like they were going to stretch it out or bring back issues. There was this one character that, was part of like the previous season, and I thought, okay, they put that to rest. That was good. But then they brought it back, and it was actually what was needed for the show. I was like, okay, this is good. But I can't praise this show enough for its writing. This is some really good writing. It's just one of those, shows that once you get past the weird premise, it's good. Like some really good character development. Oh, I forgot to crack my beer 1 second. Sorry. But yeah. I think, I'm not saying I want to follow BoJack's example, but I think I like the characters, and I like him, and kudos to the show.
Well, now that it's over, maybe I'll pick it up so I get completely caught up on Better Call Saul.
Yeah.
Honestly, there is another show I'm starting to get into. Yeah, The Mandalorian.
Wait, you haven't watched it yet?
No, I was trying to hold off for as long as I could, but I caved. I got Disney Plus. Gosh dang it. And this show, oh gosh dang it. This show is good.
It's so good.
I'm only in the first episode, but dang it, this is good. This is like everything that every Star Wars fan has been building up to. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. I guess I heard it from enough people, and they all were twisting my arm enough to say, you know what, you're missing out one of the best things that ever come out in the past few years. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do it.
No, seriously, the Katie and I have been keeping up on the Star Trek Picard show, and it's so depressing watching that after having seen The Mandalorian, and just knowing like, oh man, The Mandalorian is so good. It does this kind of show that Picard is trying to do, but it does it so much better. It does the kind of overarching story over 10 episodes, but it also has little individual episodes where they kind of do their own thing, and it does it so much more well, whereas Picard's trying to do the same sort of thing, and it's just a mess.
Yeah, I guess when you just have the right people or the right team or Disney behind you, it's bound to be good.
I had almost forgotten to watch it because I was waiting until the season was over to use like whatever free trial of Disney Plus I can get. And after the Baby Yoda memes died down, I kind of forgot about it. So I need to go back and actually watch it now.
I mean, honestly, like I said, I've only watched just one episode, the first pilot episode, and I'm hooked. I'm really hooked. So no spoilers, please, because now I'm kind of like, I'm invested. I'm in.
Well, I can't wait to check in next podcast episode and see how your Mandalorian watch is going.
We'll be done with it.
I mean, it's only 8 episodes so far for the season, so it's not going to be too bad. So we'll see. And then last but not least, I actually also watched a movie kind of related to what we are watching tonight about the Cold War called Cold War. A passionate love story between two people of different backgrounds and temperaments, set against the background of the Cold War in the 1950s in Poland, Berlin, Yugoslavia, and Paris. This film depicts a impossible love story in impossible times. So this was a movie that back in 2018, it kind of snuck up on awards season, and a lot of people weren't familiar with this. I remember people were like, what? Why is Cold War nominated for Best Director and all that? I did see this when it came out in theaters last year, and I decided to rewatch it again, and I like it. The director of this is the same one who did Ida, Paweł Pawlikowski, and I don't know, his style is very similar to Robert Bresson and a lot of Jean-Luc Godard, and so he shoots mostly in black and white, mostly on film stock, but his use of light and composition is just really good. And I think that it actually transcends even further because a big focus on this is music. Both of these characters actually come and are joined together because they're kind of like doing this touring music and dance group of like Polish folk songs. So it's interesting just to seeing how the music plays a part in this story. I don't know. Have you guys heard of this movie at all?
I remember hearing about it when it was nominated for awards, but I knew nothing about it pretty much. It didn't, and I didn't look into it.
Yeah, it was a bit of a sleeper film. I was so kind of glad that I caught it when I did because it's, I don't know, I like it. It's your typical, bittersweet, unrequited love romance that you see all the time. But I don't know, the way it's handled, it's done very well. And I don't know, I think I like the music in this. The music and how that's done is actually kind of clever. Alex, I think you might like this because it really it does a lot of investigation with like, okay, this is what the musical styles were at the time and this is what popular was. It does a lot of historical accuracy as well, because there's this one part where they're at this club in France and Rock Around the Clock comes on and everyone starts dancing, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was the big hit back then, and everybody was doing that. They were throwing chairs, but yeah, they were doing that.
Okay, yeah, that is something that piques my interest, so it might be something worth checking out for me.
Mm-hmm. And Joe, I know like how much you love Robert Bresson movies, so I think this is gonna be right up your alley. So yeah,
awesome. I'll have to add it to the list.
All right, that is pretty much it.
All right, Alex.
So I watched recently, a couple days ago, I watched Doctor Strange.
You watched an actual movie?
I watched an actual movie. I have something besides anime to talk about.
So you watched Doctor Strangelove? That's kind of cool.
Doctor Strange.
Oh.
Just cut it right there.
Okay.
So did you love Doctor Strange?
No. Yeah, it was...
All right, well, that's Alex's time on the podcast. Let's move on.
Let's move on.
It was okay. I'm not... I probably said it before, but I'm not big into Marvel movies. They don't really do it for me. I don't even remember why I wanted to watch it. I think I was thinking of a meme I had seen about it earlier, and I was like, I don't know, I was bored, so I just threw it on. But yeah, it was okay. I think the best part about it really was the visual effects, because damn, they really nailed those. Just everything about it was really cool. Everything from the kind of like larger set pieces of, the fights where they're turning New York City into this, I don't even know what to call it, this like crazy
kaleidoscope
place. Yeah, exactly. That's it.
It's if you mixed up Interstellar and Inception and shook them up in a kaleidoscope.
Yes.
With enough drugs to tranquilize an elephant.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, actually. But like the bigger set pieces like that, down to like the like the smaller stuff of just like the little portals and whatnot, I thought that was really cool. So all the visual effects were incredible. The story itself was fine, if not a bit predictable. I hated the romance subplot that was in the movie. It just felt terrible. It was so
I was
forced.
actually going to say, I actually kind of agree with you. I know like there's a lot of people who are diehard Doctor Strange fans. I was one of those very few Marvel fans that when I saw this, I was like, it was okay.
Yeah, right. Like it's just okay. Like, I like you're saying about the love story. It's just like Doctor Strange disappears for like presumably years, and then just suddenly reappears. And I think it's like Rachel McAdams, right?
Rachel McAdams, yep.
Yeah, and she just like falls in love with him all over again. It's just like, what, what, why?
Because she's Rachel McAdams, she was in The Notebook, so
I
it's
guess.
easy to pull that kind of stunt on her. No offense to any McAdams fans out there.
I guess so. It felt just dumb,
So,
honestly.
so Alex, I don't know if you've been
Yeah.
keeping up on the recent news. You might have seen Nick and I talking about it. Do you have any thoughts on the fact that Scott Derrickson, who directed Doctor Strange, was signed on to direct the sequel, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness? Then he left the project to creative differences, and now Sam Raimi is in talks to take over the movie. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I'm interested.
You're interested? Do you
Yeah.
think you're more interested with Sam Raimi on board than Scott Derrickson?
Yes, I think so. Just because of how I didn't really care for this one
Hmm.
that much, I would like to see Sam Raimi take on it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, me being a huge Sam Raimi fan, my ears instantly perked up.
Mhm.
Even though I love Scott Derrickson, I think he's a fantastic director, and I think he has real horror chops. If they were going for more of a horror angle in the sequel, but yeah, when I heard that news, I went from a downer like, oh man, Scott Derrickson left to, oh,
Yeah.
Sam Raimi's on board.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
I'm
fair
very
take.
curious to see how he's going to direct those action sequences because I want him to put that Raimi touch into it. You know, the wonderful zoom in, push canted angles.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, he does. I mean, Sam Raimi knows how to play ball with studios
Oh,
too.
yeah. But I want to see a lot of Evil Dead in this. I want to see a lot of Evil Dead.
Well, specifically, he worked with Disney before with Oz the Great and Powerful, and you could still see his style was still peppered in there.
That's
So
true. I mean, does him working on the Spider-Man series still count as like him working for Marvel Disney before that whole merger happened?
Yeah, it's still Marvel, yeah, but not necessarily Disney. That was Sony.
yeah. Anyway, if you guys are done dumping on the best movie in the MCU, Alex, do you have anything else do you want to talk about?
One last thing, or yeah, I started another anime series as well, called Inspector. I'll give you the plot line. It's so Iwanaga Kotoko became the god of wisdom to the supernatural beings and spends her days solving problems for them. However, the boy who she fell head over heels with, Sakuragawa Kuro, is someone that is feared by all supernatural creatures. The two of them face various mysterious incidents involving the supernatural in this love romance mystery series. This was one that seems to be kind of one of like the bigger series of this season, and it was one that I had heard about, checked out, but because it was more of like the like supernatural kind of like thriller, I didn't really immediately go for it. But I'm happy that I ended up just kind of checking out the first episode on a whim. But it's not so much of a thriller as it is. It's got a bit of comedy elements in there as well. Both the characters are really great, especially the girl in the series. So it really like hooked me in right from the get go.
I'm sorry, is this a new series or is this one that came out a while ago?
This is a new one.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it just premiered with this the current season. So it's already like maybe halfway through or something or so. But yeah.
Alex, I'm trying to remember, like when animes first premiere in Japan, there's a little bit of a release delay, right? Here in the States or when it comes on Crunchyroll or anything like that?
Not necessarily. There can be, I think, for some series, but this
Okay.
is simulcast.
Okay, so basically, you're kind of watching it. I wouldn't say in real time, but it's like they're not like working or completing like the second season of episodes while you're like just finally watching this.
Oh, no. This is, I mean, with there may be some sort of delay with getting the English subtitles, but I doubt it's anything more than a day.
Okay.
And with it being, on Crunchyroll, it says, simulcast on Saturdays. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's really that would really be delayed would be English dubs.
And you being such a purist, you're like, I don't need no English
English
dubs.
dubs are so terrible too, or they can be. My friend was showing me an English dub video of Demon Slayer, and it reminded me why I don't like watching English dubs. Like some of the characters they did pretty well on, and then like the main character who's obviously going to be talking more than anyone else sounds awful. Not to, shit on the voice actor, but after watching it in, subtitled and then hearing that, it just felt completely wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting. With as far as watching movies and TV shows made in other countries, I will almost always go subtitled for live action. But for animes, oddly enough, I have no problem watching them dubbed, and I'm not sure why.
I mean, that's kind of also, I grew up watching the English dub, so I am kind of used to just the hokiness of how the English actors kind of do it. But, it's like, okay, if you're going to be doing a good series, just put a little bit more effort into it. Because I've seen some really bad dubs. There are bad dubs out there.
I mean, that's how I started getting into anime too, was watching English dubs. I watched the English dub for Full Metal Alchemist, Samurai Champloo. So I watched the English dubs for those, and those are fine. But the other thing why I watch subtitled is literally like English dubs come out much later than subtitled. So if I'm trying to keep up on what's currently popular and what's currently airing, I have no choice but to watch subtitle. And I kind of prefer it. Some people may complain that they don't want to read a TV show, but it's really not a problem.
Cool.
Awesome. Do you have anything else?
No, other than that, just been starting to listen to a little bit more death metal for music, just checking out new bands and whatnot. But other than that, that's about it.
Alrighty, so I'll go next. Knives Out came out on Blu-ray last week. I picked it up, watched it for a second time. Showed Katie for the first time. This movie's really good. It's great, actually. And I know that whodunits work well on rewatches, because one of the fun things about whodunits is that the first time you watch it, you don't know what's going on. You're trying to guess everything that's happening. Yeah. And then the second time you watch it, you know all the ins and outs, what was going on, which character was where, what they were all doing. So it's interesting watching a whodunit from beginning to end, and the second time knowing everything. This one, though, I think especially works well on rewatches. For one thing, it is very well written. The characters are all very colorful. It's very entertaining. But the non-linear way that the movie decides to tell the story, and the movie really is just about the way that it gives you information. It reveals a little bit more, and it keeps turning itself on its head. And watching it from the beginning the second time, knowing, oh, this is going to look like this, but really it's going to be, this is going on. It's just, I don't know, it's a fascinating rewatch and a very quick movie to sit through.
I mean, I know like when they were marketing this movie, like one of the big things they were advertising constantly about this were all the Easter eggs, like to get, enough people interested. It's like, come and watch it again and again and see if you can catch all the Easter eggs. So, Rain Johnson kind of knew what he was doing when he was crafting this. He had all these details with his production designers, his cinematographer, and just his whole team, just to like, okay, we got to make sure this is orchestrated very well. So it is.
Yeah, the callbacks in this movie are just fantastic. The setups and the payoffs, or not even just setups and payoffs, just things that reference other things from earlier in the movie. I mean, there's a scene when a character throws a baseball out of a window, and if you notice that, that baseball keeps popping up in important bits later on. It's just fascinating the way that the movie is just put together. So is it so well crafted?
Mm-hmm.
So I would absolutely recommend Knives Out. If you've seen it once, I would recommend checking it out again. Another one, I guess, getting into murder mysteries, I'll get into another murder mystery I watched recently, which was Memories of a Murder from 2003, directed by our boy Bong Joon-ho. So a quick synopsis. 1986, the body of a young woman is found brutally raped and murdered. 2 months later, a series of rapes and murders commences under similar circumstances. And in a country that has never known such crimes, the dark whispers about a serial murderer grows louder. A special task force is set up in the area with 2 local detectives, joined by a detective from Seoul who requested to be assigned to the case. So this was, I believe, if it wasn't Bong Joon-ho's first movie, it was one of his first movies. It was a very early movie of his. Yeah, I believe this is his second movie. Have either of you guys seen Memories of a Murder?
No, we have not.
Okay, I know it came out before Zodiac, but this movie is Zodiac.
Oh, really?
Oh, okay.
It's impossible. Like if you're familiar with Zodiac, and I feel like more North American audiences are obviously familiar with Zodiac and David Fincher than they are with Memories of a Murder. But the two movies do very similar things in very similar ways. They almost feel the same. There's a case to be made that Zodiac is basically a remake of Memories of a Murder, even though I know it isn't. But what carries this movie is the main characters, the two, well, I guess really three detectives following in the case of this serial killer. The whole idea of the movie is that basically it's a small country where this kind of stuff doesn't happen. So when it does, the authorities are extremely ill prepared to deal with it, and it's about these detectives botching everything up and just not being overwhelmed and not knowing how to catch this guy.
So, question, is it more of a comedy thriller than it is like just like a suspense dark thriller?
I mean, as with any of Bong Joon-ho's movies, there's an element of comedy to it. The movie is not a comedy. It's a very dark kind of a downer movie, but it's got kind of this wry, dark sense of humor, like most of his movies. If you've seen Parasite, it's kind of a similar tone to Parasite, something like that, where it's like,
yeah, it's like almost Hitchcockian in its humor. It's like
it's
playing with the audience. You know that you really shouldn't be laughing at this, but you can't help yourself. It's like
there is a lot of gallows humor, but the movie itself is a very engaging, tense movie. And it's frustrating because these characters, they think they know what to do. One of them has this thing that he does where he says, "Oh, I can just look a guy in the eyes and I know whether he's guilty or not." And as he realizes he's in over his head, he's realizing that his kind of homebrewed ways of doing things just don't work in this situation. So if you can get your hands on it, I know it used to be on Amazon Prime. I don't think it is anymore, but if you can get your hands on this movie, I would highly recommend checking it out if you're a fan of Bong Joon-ho.
Yeah, I feel like I want to kind of investigate a little bit more of his filmography, because other than just Snowpiercer and Okja, like I don't know a lot of this guy's body of work. So if this is his second film, I'm like, okay, I'm curious now.
Interesting thing about Bong Joon-ho is that I discovered him through The Host, and I loved that movie in college before knowing anything else that he had made, which is the monster movie that he made. And it's been kind of interesting seeing him develop as a more and more mainstream, well-known director till he won Best Picture with Parasite. Because I remember in college, like, oh man, this movie, The Host, you gotta check it out. It blows your mind. And now it's like Snowpiercer, Okja, like everybody knows him now, which is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's becoming a household name now, which is kind of cool.
Then the last movie I want to talk about is The Tree of Life.
Yay, my favorite Terrence Malick film.
You know what? It's mine too now. It didn't used to be, but it is now.
Really? I mean, you kept saying like I think Days of Heaven was like your favorite of his.
Right. So historically, Days of Heaven has been my favorite. A Hidden Life recently surpassed that. Rewatching Tree of Life though now, I'm convinced this is Terrence Malick's masterpiece.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's allegorical, abstract, but it's not alienating. The movie is very relatable, even though there isn't really kind of like a solid story. That's what I liked about A Hidden Life, was that he took this kind of fanciful, dreamlike cinematography and editing, and he applied it to a really grounded story. But Tree of Life has that in it, but it also has all this other stuff on top of it. The timeline jumping, the creation of the world, kind of this afterlife stuff. And I think the movie's style works for this kind of a story perfectly. And anybody who doesn't connect to this movie, I completely get it. I just think that out of most of his movies, this is probably the one that has the most potential to connect with a wide range of people in very different ways. I think each person gets something different out of this movie, and you connect with it in a very different way because there is a lot going on, and there is no just one reading to it, but it is a very relatable movie. This time was my first time watching the extended cut that Criterion Collection put out, which is just over 3 hours long.
Jeez.
Well, wasn't like the original like supposed to be almost 5 hours?
Like the original cut out there somewhere, there's a 5-hour cut that Terrence Malick cut down. This is basically his ultimate version. Well, it's not his ultimate version of the movie. He said in interviews that he doesn't want people to think of, oh, one version is better than the other. He just wants people to think of the extended version as another version of the movie. In fact, when they were making this, I remember reading about how he originally tried to do something where they were going to use the technology in the Blu-ray to put together an experimental thing where every time you put the movie in, it strung together the clips in a slightly different order. So there is no like one definitive cut. It's every time you get a slightly different version of the movie, but they weren't able to make it feasibly work. So he just basically did this version.
Joe, is that absolutely true? Like that was like his intention?
It was when they were putting out the Criterion Collection Blu-ray. It was one thing they were looking into doing and trying to do, and they couldn't quite figure it out. So he thought, oh, okay, because he didn't want people to think, oh, the extended edition is my cut. Because when he put out the theatrical cut, he put out the version that he wanted to make, and when he got another crack at it, he thought, well, there's a lot of other stuff I didn't put in there that would have been nice to put in there. So let's put together another version of the movie. So there's like just pick your choice, whether you feel like sitting there for 2 hours or 3 hours. He's got you covered.
Honestly, that kind of concept of using the Blu-ray to do that kind of excites me. I almost want to see films like be done now in a way where it's like you could mishmash like the order of sequences and scenes around, and it would still give you a different experience. It wouldn't like be so convoluted and so like jarring that it just leaves you hanging, but it could still work. That there's a market there, Joe.
And if you're going to do that for a movie, like Tree of Life is the movie to do that for.
It is.
As far as extended cut versus theatrical cut, my recommendation is whatever you feel like. The extended cut is great. And I think moving forward, if I have the time or if I feel like it, I'll probably end up throwing the extended cut on. But if I just feel like a quick 2-hour Tree of Life movie, I'll just throw on the theatrical cut and I'll feel like I'm not missing anything. There's a lot more stuff thrown in there, but it's not like, oh, you're missing super important scenes, or I can't believe they cut this scene. It's just kind of more life stuff with the kids. There's some more stuff with Sean Penn. It's just more of it, and it doesn't to me at least, it didn't feel like it dragged the movie on. I wasn't able to watch it all in one sitting, so maybe that helped. But yeah, I feel like both cuts are equally worthwhile. It just depends on how long you want to be sitting there.
Honestly, I think there should be some kind of a Terrence Malick challenge out there. It's like if you can watch all of his movies in a row and not budge from your seat or fall asleep, you win like this grand prize or something like that to get a free Blu-ray of a Terrence Malick film.
That might be a little bit much even for me, who's who loves Terrence Malick.
I know you're such a purist when it comes to it, so it's like if that's too much for you. Yeah, we're probably pushing the bar there.
Alex, have you seen Tree of Life?
I started it a long time ago. I think it was back in college. I had started watching it and then I just turned it off. I was like, this is too much for me right now.
When it got to the dinosaurs, he was like, I'm kind of done.
No, it wasn't even. I don't think it was even that. Like, I barely got into it. Yeah.
Oh, really?
I think it was mostly just like I just wasn't in the mood for it at the time. Tree of Life's been something I want to watch for a long time, but I just haven't put aside the time because I've just been waiting for the right moment to watch it because I want to like it. So I'm waiting until I'm in the mood to actually like sit down and watch and give it like the proper attention that I feel like I really want to give it.
Yeah, I recommend if you decide to do it, just stock up on as much Red Bull and coffee and just something to keep you awake for the next few hours because, yeah.
I mean, I'm into that kind of stuff. If it's really quiet and really slow, that's my thing.
Okay.
So I don't think I'm going to have too much trouble getting through it once I finally sit down.
Gotcha.
Anyway, yeah, that will do it for my movies. And with that, let's move on to our main topic, which is WarGames.
WarGames.
This computer company is coming out with these amazing new games in a couple of months. And I want to play those games. Wow. What? We got something.
He found the right code word to play the game.
We're in.
But it was the wrong computer.
Shall we play a game?
How can I ask you that?
How about Global Thermonuclear War?
Fine.
All right.
WarGames is a 1983 American Cold War science fiction film written by Lawrence Lasker and Walter F. Parks and directed by John Badham. The film follows David Lightman, played by Matthew Broderick, a young hacker who unwittingly accesses War Operation Plan Response, also known as WOPR, which is a United States military supercomputer originally programmed to predict possible outcomes of nuclear war. Lightman gets WOPR to run a nuclear war simulation, believing it is a computer game. The computer, now tied to the nuclear weapons control system and unable to tell the difference between simulation and reality, attempts to almost start World War III. So this was my pick-a-flick. This was one I had not seen before, and the big reason why I wanted to see this is because it is actually a movie referenced in Ready Player One, the book version, not the movie version, the book. It's actually one of the games that the character Wade Watts has to complete in, I guess, the game for the Easter egg that they're having to find. And the scene that they have to play is actually in the arcade. We're first introduced to David Lightman, who is just basically just playing this version of Galaga, and then this kid comes up and has to take his place. So, that's what was referenced in the book. But I always kind of was curious, like, okay, I've never seen the movie, and it got nominated for 3 Oscars. So I'm like, well, let's give it a shot.
Well, here's my question. As far as the Ready Player One goes, are you currently reading Ready Player One, or had you read it before and were interested in the movie, just getting around to it now?
I mean, I had read the book a long time ago, just at the time, I guess, when the movie was coming out. So I remember reading that part, and I was like, okay, well, when I have time, I'll revisit it, because at the time I just did not seem interested. So, and I kind of thought, you know what, this seems kind of like a movie we could watch. It's one of those interesting cult classics. So yeah.
All right. So Alex, had you seen this before?
I had not. No, I've not seen it.
And what were your thoughts?
I thought it was pretty good. The concept is pretty interesting, and I like the idea of hacking into NORAD's main computer just on accident. I thought that was kind of cool. A little kind of, I guess, campy. Maybe that's not really the right word, but
I would say it's campy.
Yeah. Okay.
That was actually one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about, because like this was made at the time when computers were still kind of a new thing to the market. You kind of like looking at it, it's like it's still like those dot matrix kind of computers with like the black screens, the minimal text. Like it's not very well like elaborate that what we're so used to and what most kids are growing up with these days. This feels dated. Like you look back and it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, those were computers back then. That was the standard technology. And looking at it and watching it, there is a level of comedy in this where it's like as tense and as like suspenseful as this premise could be, there's parts where you can't really take it too seriously, because that 80s soundtrack starts coming up and it's so whimsical and light, even though Matthew Broderick's trying to get away from the FBI agents, and there's the guard who's trying to hit on the secretary, asking if she plays tennis. It's like, okay, there's a certain level here where it's like you're gonna just have fun with this.
Yeah, what's interesting about that too is they originally had a different director.
Yes, I was actually going to talk about that, Martin Brest.
So he was originally going to shoot in a much darker, more thriller type of movie before John Badham took over.
Yeah, he actually Martin Brest actually was only hired to do the project for like 12 days, and then the studio sacked him. And here's a fun story, actually. John Badham, when he actually came on set to the soundstage to shoot this scene, everybody was like tense because they all thought, okay, the director just got fired. Are we all next? So to lighten the mood, actually, he made Matthew Broderick and all the other actors have like a relay race around the studio. And he said, all right, we're all going to have a race. And the one who loses has to sing in front of everybody. And of course, John Badham, who's like, a good director, lost, and he sang the Happy Wanderer to everybody in the studio. So we already kind of get an idea for this guy, this director, John, who is, he knows how to make actors and people on the set feel at home. And it's like, yeah, I think that's kind of like what shines in the movie, is just like that lightness.
So this is my 3rd time watching this movie. I love this movie.
You love it?
I love this movie. It's such a great movie. Every time I watch it, I give it 4 stars out of 5, and every time I'm on the verge of bumping it up.
Really? Is it all those sweeping shots of the Whopper computer that just like you like, or is it just is it the flying dinosaur that happens halfway through?
It's one of those concept movies that just works with its concept. It's simple. It's just kid hacks into a nuclear computer, almost starts World War III. And it's simple. It's perfect for the time, for the 80s, with the computers and technology changing, with the history, with the Cold War and nuclear threats, being in the past and everything. It's a perfect mixture, all these great kind of 80s movie cliches, but it just works. Matthew Broderick is great in it. Ali Sheedy is great in it. They're prime 80s teen stars in this very nerdy movie. I love how nerdy it is. I don't know how many kids watching this movie today are confused by the fact that he uses telephones to hack into the computer.
Well, that's like another reason why I was like, I kind of feel like that's a reason why this kind of movie has kind of gone to the wayside a little bit, because it's so dependent on the technology as being part of the story. And the technology then was as advanced as it was. But today it's like, we have surpassed that. So I can see why not too many people are familiar with this, because it's like they can't relate to like, this is what computers are like. This is what hacking was like. This is like, why would you have to go through all this effort? But that's kind of like what you had to do. And, it's just kind of a nice little film, Joe. I think you're right, where you can step back in time and be like, this is what the 80s was like. This is what having a desktop was like. This is what floppy disks were like.
It's one of those movies that personifies the 80s. It's a time capsule. It's a sort of movie where if they made it today, it would be an incredibly different movie. And you couldn't make this movie today.
No.
I think when a lot of people think of the 80s, they think of the neon lights and all the crazy over-the-top clothes and all that kind of stuff. But this kind of movie shows what the 80s actually felt like and looked like. And these characters feel like Matthew Broderick feels like a kid out of an 80s movie, just transplanted into a very nerdy version of what the 80s was.
Yeah. Oh, I actually want to talk a little bit about this. So this movie was actually before Matthew Broderick was a huge international star. This was like prior to Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And Joe, you mentioned you think he does a solid job as playing David Lightman, this, believable kid who, if he was to pull this off, this is kind of how you would act. In watching his performance, I'm kind of glad something like Ferris Bueller came around, because I keep looking at Matthew Broderick and like, this guy, he's kind of... I'm surprised he made it past the audition. He's so weird and nerdy. But maybe that's exactly what they were looking for. So,
by the way, I should give a disclaimer that all the stuff about saying that the movie feels like the 80s, I wasn't actually around for the 80s. I'm just saying that's the feeling the movie gave me. I was born in the early 90s, so I'm just saying, based on the feeling and the style of the movie, it feels like what I think, it's a different version of the 80s.
Joe, are you sure that you weren't in this movie? Because I know it's set in Seattle, part of it.
True.
You could have been one of those kids in the background, with the tall, weird coif hair with the weird polo shirt going on. You must have been that kid. You must have been.
I wish I was, but I wouldn't even be bored for like another 8 years after this movie came out.
If Joshua tricks them into launching an attack, it'll be your fault.
My fault? The whole point was to find a way to practice nuclear war without destroying ourselves. To get the computers to learn from mistakes we couldn't afford to make. Except that I never could get Joshua to learn the most important lesson.
What's that?
Futility. That there's a time when you should just give up.
What kind of a lesson is that?
Did you ever play tic-tac-toe?
Yeah, of course.
But you don't anymore.
No.
Why?
Because it's a boring game. It's always a tie.
Exactly. There's no way to win. The game itself is pointless. But back at the war room, they believe you can win a nuclear war. That there can be acceptable losses.
So I kind of want to delve into this a little bit. So we were talking about how this movie has a very interesting pacing to it and a very lightness to it. But it's without to say that this movie taps into some morality behind nuclear warfare and, the possibility of total annihilation. There comes a part where I think maybe we should give a spoilers warning right now, because we kind of will dabble into that. So at one point, Matthew Broderick and his girlfriend actually come across this island where the creator of the Whopper computer is still alive. Everyone thought he was presumed dead or gone, but he was there living his existence kind of like as an unknown. And he's like the only person who can actually help and stop this thing. But he's like, I don't want to, because mankind is kind of always been pushing itself to this limit. And it's only a matter of time before we become extinct like these dinosaurs. And it's kind of like, there's a very interesting scene where it's he's projecting like these old footage films of dinosaurs in their prehistoric eras while he's giving this talk. And he's really tapping into this thing like, if we treat nuclear warfare like a game like this, which, the United States and the Soviet Union were doing, then annihilation is inevitable and we just have to accept it. And I don't know, it kind of got deep at that point, as lighthearted as this movie was. So
Yeah, that was kind of an unexpected scene for it to like just a interesting turn it just suddenly took. It's just like, whoa, okay, this is actually what we're dealing with here. That was a really cool point to bring up though, and it was very frustrating watching this character at first because
you think he's a little kooky. He's like he's flying this pterodactyl on this island.
Yeah.
Trying to dive bomb at these kids, and you're like, should we say he's like has a few marbles loose in his head right now, or should we actually be paying attention to him? And he's got some valid things to say.
Yeah, to a point. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I don't know where I was exactly going with that, but yeah, that was a really cool scene where it just like it suddenly took a turn and got into something really a lot deeper, just because most of the movie up to that point had just been kind of a lot more lighthearted. And then it suddenly got to this point and we're like, oh, this is the stakes that we're really dealing with here.
Although there is one thing I kind of think that bothered me about the movie is the fact that Matthew Broderick he easily got into like the tourist group and was able to get out of a heavily guarded government facility that way.
I mean, yeah, there's points. There's one note I saved where it's like, what was the main guy at NORAD who's kind of running Whopper and everything like that. He's taken Broderick around and he takes him to his office to kind of question him and whatnot.
Dabney Coleman.
Dabney Coleman, yeah.
He takes him around to his office and then something happens in the main room. So the doctor leaves Matthew Broderick in his office alone after
unfacilitated, yeah.
Yeah, like he suspects him of being a Russian spy, and he's just like, I'm just gonna leave you here with my computer that's probably hooked up to like everything.
Mm-hmm.
We already know you hacked into our computer from the outside, but let me just leave you here for like a few minutes unwatched.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
Okay, I love this movie. I think you guys are giving it a little bit too much credit for that scene where Falcon is being all doom and gloom. It's fine. It works. It works for the movie. It's not even a negative for the movie. I just didn't find it especially deep or anything. Just because I think we see that kind of stuff from movies from the 70s and 80s, where a very kind of a nihilistic, like humanity is screwing up the planet kind of a thing. We got that in like the ultimate version of that was Silent Running with Bruce Dern. Came out in the 10 years before, where it's like, we're killing the trees and everything. What are we doing? And it's just kind of like, oh, it's just another one of those. Like, is this guy like, humans don't deserve to go on? Oh, but don't worry, I'll come around in the end because because humans deserve another chance.
I know. I think what just made that scene in particular just kind of stand out for me is just the staging of it all. Like, throughout this whole movie, it's been kind of like this chase action suspense thriller where, Matthew Broderick is trying to run for his life and just find the source and nobody will believe him and he's trying not to endanger anyone. So, but then when it gets to here, it's like, all right, this guy's showing a old footage of dinosaurs in his study on this island and kind of giving like this whole like thing, like we will be like these dinosaurs. I'm like, oh, okay. I was not expecting that kind of a turn. So maybe not so much like, oh, we give this scene a lot of credit, but it stood out that way.
Oh yeah. Very, very well staged.
Yeah. They get to the island and they find him and you think, oh, great. They found the guy who made the computer. He's of course going to be on their side, and then it takes that turn and you're just like, wait a second, where are we going with this now?
And also, I just like the way it was shot as well. The DP for this, he got actually nominated for an Oscar as well for this movie. So his use of lighting for that scene, using the projector light and just the lamps in that room, and even just like, I guess, like the war room as well, is just like the way that's all set up in the sound stage and everything's lit. It felt real. It felt like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then especially at the end, that finale where all those blinking lights are happening, it just is kind of, I thought that was like the coolest thing.
Yeah, there are a few scenes that stand out as being really well shot. Those ones you mentioned, yeah, definitely in particular. Especially with the projector on the doctor there. I thought that was really cool.
So Dabney Coleman is in this movie.
Mhm.
Dabney Coleman is also in a movie that came out the following year, Cloak and Dagger, which is directed by my main man, Richard Franklin.
Yeah, I knew you were going to drop that in somehow.
It's another 1980s movie starring a kid with espionage and danger and all that kind of stuff. So I just want to throw that in there. Everyone should watch Cloak and Dagger. It's amazing.
Mhm.
That's yours. That's his 2 cents of Cloak and Dagger.
With Dabney Coleman, who's apparently was cranky during Cloak and Dagger and didn't want to be in the movie.
Look, it just added to the character, just it was perfect. Speaking of cranky, did anyone kind of get excited when Michael Madsen appeared in the first scene in this movie?
Okay, like I said, this is my third time watching this movie. This time was my first time noticing that he was in the movie.
I know.
I didn't notice him the first 2 times.
I was kind of like trying to second guess myself. I'm like, no, that right? No, that him.
I did the exact same thing when he showed up. This time, I was like, that guy looks a lot like Michael Madsen, and then my brain was like doing math. Like, wait, could that be Michael Madsen? Like,
he kind of looks like him. He sounds like him. He acts like him. No.
But he had one close up where I was like, no, that's not him. And then I looked it up later. I'm like, oh yeah, it was totally Michael Madsen.
I mean, definitely, it's a very young guy. And I don't know. That's another scene that I kind of thought is interesting. It kind of sets the tone of everything in this movie. That opening hook scene where we have these 2 operators who kind of like are taking over the night shift, and then they get this red code alert, and they're like, all right, we have to follow protocol. We have to turn our keys, and we have to launch these missiles. And then one of them is like saying, wait, something doesn't seem right. Why would they make us do this?
All missiles enabled.
-30. Get me wing command post on your direct
That's
line.
not the correct procedure, Captain.
SAC. Try SAC headquarters on the HF.
That's not the correct procedure.
Screw the procedure. I want somebody on the goddamn phone before I kill 20 million people.
T-20. I got nothing here. They might have been knocked out already.
Right. On my mark, rotate launch keys to launch.
Roger, ready to go to launch.
14.
Yeah, WarGames is a great movie. That opening scene is a great scene. Like it's up there on my list of favorite opening scenes for movies. If you go in knowing this is about Matthew Broderick hacking into a computer, that opening scene is kind of interesting because it has no characters that you see later on in the movie, no characters that you know of. It's a very tense situation, a very relatable situation, as in like it's very human. You get to why this guy wouldn't turn the key, and is he going to? Is he not going to? Should he even? It's like you know nothing about these characters, but in the span of just a few minutes, the movie tells a great story with just little characters doing their jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's very tense.
I mean, actually, if you were to kind of like take that out of the movie and just make it as like a little short film, it actually is a self-standing short film.
It is, yeah. There was one thing I wanted to point out, and something that, for whatever reason, caught my eye during that, and it's a weird thing. When they're walking into the little office there, behind like the huge door, there's a sign on the wall that I thought was very, very weird. And it says, anyone urinating in this area will be discharged. Like, is this a problem that they've had before?
They might have just had that one guy who just
who screwed it up for everyone.
Screwed it up for everybody, and it's like, now we have to put that signage.
They put the sign up. They had to deal with it before.
Joe, can you actually write a short film about the guy who is responsible for why that sign is there in the first place? Like, just like a little kind of like excerpt, but like, okay, this is protocol, but let's follow this guy who got drunk on the job.
Just peeing in the nuclear launch.
Maybe that's like the reason why they Yellow Code or something like that. We can call it. That's the working title for this. It's called Yellow Code.
Gosh.
Tense and dark versus comedic and light. What do you guys think about the tone of this movie?
I think it plays around with it very well. It's got its moments, kind of like we were talking about with the Doctor on the Island, and then it's got the moments of, just the fun kind of chase scenes of Matthew Broderick escaping and, getting out of the room he's being held in. So yeah, I would kind of like to see what this would have been with the original director doing it. I would have it would be interesting to see it much darker and much fall into much more of the like thriller and suspense genres.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of a little bit right there with you, Alex. I'm kind of a little, I wouldn't say like torn with this movie, but a little half and half with like, you know what? It's not a bad experience watching this movie with like, how it switches back and forth between tense and then comedy. And kind of thinking about it, I think if this was done the way that Martin Brest wanted it originally, I can see this movie just bombing at the theaters at the time. A lot of the stuff that this movie is dealing with is like what was on everyone's radar at the time, and people were afraid of like, okay, who is a spy? Are we going to be on the brink of annihilation? I know like we have a lot of like just entertainment and distractions right now, but heck, we could hack into something and this could set off a lot of things. Having enough comedy in here kind of helps you come back to reality and realize this is just a movie. And, I kind of wish I could have gotten something a little bit more serious and more intense, but I have to say I enjoyed it. I think it's worth watching. And like I said, Joe, you kind of comment on this. It is like a time capsule piece of the 80s. And I think that's what I kind of got the biggest thrill out of, is just looking at all those references. And this is like what life was like back then. And it's a good movie to kind of just like put in and just be like, you know what? This is what it was like 50 years ago. Or sorry, 40 years ago.
Yeah, I think a darker version of this movie would be interesting to watch.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll be honest, I like this movie. I think the ideal version of this movie is as it is, because I like the fact that it is kind of, it's a tense movie. It deals with some very real issues. It's also just kind of like a fun romp with Matthew Broderick running around. It's got the science fiction element with the chatting with the computer and the back and forth with Whopper. And I like that kind of adventuresome, lighthearted tone to this movie. And I think making it a little bit darker would have been interesting for a different version of this movie. But I think ultimately I would have enjoyed this one more as it is. Talking about the fact that it was meant to be a much darker movie and then it ended up getting turned into a lighter movie, it reminds me of another movie that deals with nuclear annihilation as almost like a farce, which is Dr. Strangelove, which also was originally conceived to be a straightforward thriller by Stanley Kubrick. And over the course of writing the movie, he and a guy he was writing with came up with all these comedical situations, and we're just kind of joking around, and they thought, you know what, let's just make this a comedy because we've got all these great funny scenes anyway in our heads.
Yeah, at the same time, we also want to make a movie that's going to make money, and that's always like on everyone's mind. And didn't Peter Sellers also was a huge contributing factor to just the comedy in that script? Didn't he get like a writing credit?
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure on set he had a lot of just carte blanche, just like go and do whatever he wants. But
which is interesting, considering that Stanley Kubrick is such a strict, stick to exactly what I want to do. But I wouldn't be surprised if he let Peter Sellers have a little bit more leeway with that.
So one of the thing I was going to bring up, and it was just a little side note, is for the actor playing Falcon, they originally wanted Stephen Hawking to be in the movie as Falcon. Hawking ended up declining after showing a little interest, but the writers or directors had still wanted Falcon to be in a motorized wheelchair. But the reason they went against that was because they felt it was going to be too close to Dr. Strangelove.
Oh, that's
interesting.
True. That is interesting. Yeah. I also kind of know the doctor's name Falcon is kind of inspired from Stephen Hawking's name as well. So that's the one thing that kind of carried through.
That makes sense.
That's cool. Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that little trivia up.
IMDb credits William H. Macy as being a NORAD officer somewhere in the movie. I was looking for him and I didn't notice him, so I cannot confirm nor deny that William H. Macy is actually in this movie.
Can I also just say that Barry Corbin, the guy who plays the general in this movie, is a hoot to watch.
Yes.
Him just like literally just like throwing all these one-liners and
I'd piss on a
drinking-
spark plug if I think it'd help.
and him like eating like what cashews and drinking Dr. Pepper. It's like on the side. I'm like, this is so 80s like U.S. general. Love it.
Yeah, I mean, there were parts where he seemed a little bit too lighthearted for the moment, but he was great.
No, he knew when to switch it on and switch it off, and I think that's kind of was a good just balance of the movie in general.
Mm-hmm.
What did you guys think of Whopper himself? As far as I mean, it's probably the most sci-fi thing in this movie, in this science fiction movie. Do you think it was a little bit too outlandish, or do you like the way it was presented?
Well, Whopper itself is a little bit extreme, but I believe that the U.S. actually had computers doing exactly that.
I mean, honestly, the only thing I was thinking about every time they said Whopper was Burger King. So
Yeah.
literally, I was like, okay, I need to get through this movie, and I'm just going to go to the drive-thru because dang it. Oh, yeah, there's Grubhub. I forgot about that.
You don't even have to go anywhere. You can stay at home.
I know.
It's the 21st century.
Oh, my gosh. This is Ready Player One.
Anyway, you guys ready to go to final thoughts?
I guess we can.
Anything else you wanted to bring up, Nate?
I guess if anything, the one thing I'd say is don't eat raw corn. Joe, why is corn? Why does corn keep showing up in all these movies that we're reviewing? I don't know why.
We are no longer film illiterates. We are watching movies where people eat corn.
So Children of the Corn should be the next film we discuss then, right?
Does anybody eat corn in Children of the Corn?
Well, they turn people into corn husks, or they do something. It's been a while since I've seen that movie. I need to revisit.
They run
again.
through corn. They like live in corn fields.
But yeah, for some reason, like the mother just makes everyone eat raw corn. I'm like, what a weirdo.
There's a podcast out there. I think it's called the Exploding Helicopter Podcast, where they talk about every movie that has a scene where a helicopter explodes, and they like analyze those scenes. We should do that, but just for movies where there's a field of corn.
Or corn is somehow used as a plot device or something that just moves the story along. Like in Sleepwalkers, there's a scene with corn.
Or Troll 2.
Oh, no.
We need to watch Troll 2. We do need to watch Troll 2.
All right. This is getting out of hand. I'm gonna give my my final thoughts. I love WarGames. I think it's a great movie. Once again, it's a time capsule of a movie. Matthew Broderick is having a lot of fun in it. Ali Sheedy. These are 80s names in most nerdy mainstream 80s movies you'll probably end up watching. I think it's a lot of fun. It touches up on timely topics for its time. And I'll probably end up watching it again sometime in the future.
Yeah, I think for this being my first time seeing it and trying to see how it tied in with Ready Player One or why it was even used in the story of Ready Player One, I can see why. This is definitely a film that just has 80s soaked all over it. It's like, this is like, it has the technology, it has the little like gimmicks and the little things, the music, the soundtrack, the lightheartedness, but also just the dark tones that this goes with. And at a time when, we had this, technology of, computers and the internet and hacking into things, it plays with those elements very well for its time. And if anything, like, we've advanced quite a bit since then. And I think this is just a good movie just to look back on and say, that's what they came up with last time.
I enjoyed it. It's fun, as much as we talked about maybe like more of the serious aspect of it. The majority of it is really lighthearted and enjoyable to watch. So it's not something that you're going to get too bogged down with. I love the way it handled technology in the film. Technology at the time, with the writers actually talking to real hackers and people at the time who were very knowledgeable at that stuff. To different points where the actor for Falcon was actually the voice of the Whopper computer.
That's one thing I did remember. Yeah, I was like, they sound similar.
Yeah, because they just had him read sentences in reverse to get them more like monotone, cut and dry.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So it's a cool movie. It's surprisingly an influential one in U.S. history because it actually changed U.S. policy after Ronald Reagan watched the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he watched the movie, and then was talking with high level military generals and guys, and brought up the question of, can someone actually do this? And so they actually, like, because of this movie, the U.S. got much more into cybersecurity. For an as influential as that is, the movie still, like I said, it's lighthearted, it's fun, and it's enjoyable to watch. It's not one that's going to leave really much of a lasting impression on me, but it's one you can definitely turn on like pretty much any time and get a kick out of it.
Can I just say I'm actually really appreciative that Alex, you brought your A game and did your research for this movie, because that is actually this is your moment to shine, man. This is cool.
Yeah, I watched a couple of videos on this, so I got a bunch of different random facts.
I really like that. That's kind of like, I was like, who's going to be the big nerd about this movie? Is it going to be Joe? Is it going to be me? But no, Alex, you came up. You brought your A game. Congrats, man.
When Alex digs deep, he digs.
He digs really deep into that technology. Speaking of digging into technology, do you know there's actually a guy in that big Whopper set piece actually programming on a computer, and just like when there's like, give us this, and he was like typing inside that giant machine. So.
Oh, interesting.
Really?
Yeah. There's a guy in there.
That'll do for this episode of the Film Illiterates podcast. You can find us on filmilliterates.com or youtube.com/filmilliterates. Nate, where can people find you?
All right. Well, you can find me here on this podcast with these two guys. I'm also trying to get back on Letterboxd, record my films, and I'll be at Nathan_Stone_films at there, as well as at Instagram.
Alex?
You can find me. I'll watch all of our old Film Illiterates episodes on filmilliterates.com. Other than that, you can find me on Letterboxd under Half Scrim. I'm also under the same name on Rate Your Music, if you want to catch up on some of the death metal I've been listening to. Other than that, I'm also on Twitter at Alex D. Patton.
And you can find me on Twitter at Film Illiterates and on letterboxd.com/film_illiterate. And we don't have the next episode planned out yet, so just stay tuned for whenever we come out with that, and keep watching movies and keep it easy.